Today we're going to take a look at Little Sprouts stitch. So this is a neat little stitch with what looks like almost baubles. They're not quite baubles, but it's just little puffs that are made from strategically placed increases and decreases. So I'm going to walk you through that stitch right now. Here I've got a swatch already completed, or partially completed I should say, and we're ready to work row 1. So row 1 of this stitch is a right side row, and I've got a garter stitch border of 3 stitches on either end just to frame things nicely. So I'm going to begin with a knit 3, and then my pattern repeat begins with purl 2. So bring the yarn to the front of the work to purl 2. And then I'm going to make an increase. I'm going to knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, all in the next stitch. So I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to insert my needle as if to knit from left to right in the next stitch, wrap the yarn around, pull it through, and instead of sliding it off the needle, I'm going to knit again into this same stitch. So we're working a purl stitch because we can't really, if I try to work a knit again, it's just not going to work. I can't wrap the yarn around again. So I need to work a purl stitch and alternate in between. So I have to bring my yarn to the front again, in between the 2 needles, and then I'm going to purl into that very same stitch. Insert my needle from right to left, wrap the yarn around, pull it through, and I still have to work a knit, a purl, and a knit again, all into that same stitch, so I'm not going to pull it off the left-hand needle. I'm going to bring the yarn to the back in between the 2 needles, knit into that same stitch again, pull the yarn through. Now I still have a purl and a knit, so I'm going to bring the yarn in between the needles to the front of the work to purl the very same stitch again. And now the last stitch is a knit. So bring the yarn to the back in between the needles, and in that same stitch again, knit. So now that I've worked all those stitches into the same loop, into the same stitch, now I can pull that off the left-hand needle. So what I've done there is make a big increase. I've made 5 stitches out of 1 stitch. I've increased 4 stitches all in the same place. So we'll go through that again, but let me just finish the repeat here, which is finished off with a purl 2 and a knit 1. So it's a multiple of 6. That was 6 stitches in pattern we did. So let's work those 6 stitches again. I'm going to begin with purl 2, and then next comes my fancy increase stitch. So it's knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, all in the same stitch, and believe it or not, they fit. So there's my knit 1, don't slip the stitch off the left-hand needle, bring the yarn to the front, insert your needle from right to left through that same stitch, yarn around needle, don't slip it off the left-hand needle, bring the yarn to the back, knit in that very same stitch. And all of these stitches are worked into the front loop of the stitch. So then I have a knit, purl, knit. I'll work another purl by bringing my yarn to the front. Bring my yarn to the back. And knit in the same stitch again. And now I can slip it off the left-hand needle. So you can see here, I've got all of those stitches. They're all connected to that 1 stitch that I worked into. So now to finish off, purl 2, knit 1. And then work 3 knit stitches for my garter stitch border. So that's knit 1 with my increases. So what's a little unusual about this stitch pattern is that I've made those increases, but I'm not going to make decreases to compensate for those increases for another couple of rows. And that's what makes these little puffs. These are the extra stitches that I've just created, and you'll see that a little more clearly once I move on. So that was my first row of sprout stitch, which is a right side row. This is a wrong side row. So I'm going to just do a knit 3 again for my border. Then I'm going to bring the yarn to the front, purl 1, knit 2, purl 5. So those are those, this is the wrong side of those stitches we just increased. That's the 5 stitches we made from 1 stitch. We're going to purl all of those. And knit 2. So this is the type of row that is sometimes referred to as knitting the knits and purling the purls. You just let the stitch tell you what to do. So I've got a purl 1, knit 2, and in the case of this knit 1, purl 1, increase all in the same stitch, I'm actually just purling all of those. So it's not quite a knit the knits and purl the purls, but very similar. Purl 5, knit 2, and then my last 3 stitches are my border, so that's just a knit 3. That's row 2. And now row 3 is a right side row again. I need to knit the first 3 stitches, which is the border. Oops, drop that one, I'll just knit that again. And then I'm going to start my repeat, which is purl 2, knit 5, purl 2, and knit 1. So this repeat, or this row rather, really is a true knit the knits and purl the purl stitches as you see them row. Purl 2, knit 5, purl 2, knit 1, and then knit 3 at the end of the row for my garter stitch border. So you can see the pattern starting to form here. My extra stitches all in the knit right there on the right side row. Okay, so now for row 4, which is exactly the same as row 2. It's a wrong side row. I'm going to begin with a knit 3 as always to keep my garter stitch border. Then purl 1, knit 2. Again, I'm just knitting each knit stitch and purling each purl stitch. Purl 5. These are my extra stitches, the area of extra stitches that I increased on that first row. Knit 2. Purl 1. Knit 2. Purl 5. Knit 2, and then knit 3 for my garter stitch border. So row 5, a right side row, is where I'm going to decrease to compensate for those stitches that I increased on the first row. Otherwise, if I didn't decrease again, my knitting would just get wider as I increase, because I now have 4 extra stitches for every repeat that I've worked. So we want our work to remain the same size, the same width. So to compensate for that, I'm going to decrease on this row, and that's also what makes these neat little puffs. So for row 5, right side row, I'm going to knit 3. And then purl 2. And now I'm at that area of my increased stitches. I have 5 knit stitches in a row, and I'm going to K5 tog, or knit 5 together. And that's exactly as it sounds if you've done a K2 tog or a K3 tog. I'm going to knit all 5 stitches together at once. So this might take a little finagling of your right side, your right hand needle here, but I'm going to begin over and work from left to right through all of these stitches at once. So I'm just going to sort of guide that with my index finger on my left hand. You really got to work in there. And it's a little easier to get your needle through if your needles are sort of parallel to each other. You have a little more room to maneuver. Just hold them in that funny position for a while as you yarn around the needle and carefully pull that through. It's a little tricky. And now I've knit 5 all together. And that's decreased 4 stitches. I've turned 5 stitches back into 1. And you can see already that that's drawn in the top of that little puff there. So let's work the next repeat and show you that again. So I'm going to purl 2, knit 1, purl 2, and now I've got my knit 5 together, or K5 tog. So again, I'm going to work from left to right, inserting my right hand needle through all of these 5 stitches at once, starting from the one from the furthest end from the needle. Just wiggle that in there. Yarn around the needle and pull it through. Again, I'm sort of guiding it along with the index finger on my left hand. It is a little tricky to maneuver. And now I've got them all strung together, and now I'm back to 1 stitch. Then I'm going to purl 2, knit 1, and knit 3 to finish off my border. So that was the 5th row, and the only difference working the rest of the 12 row repeat is that we're just alternating where we do those increases and decreases. And you can see the little puffs are staggered as you work along, but it's exactly the same technique. You're working an increase of 4 stitches all into 1, which is right here. That's our knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, all in the same stitch. And then you're sort of closing off that little puff on this 5th row where you're K5 tog, or knitting 5 together. And that's it. That makes a really effective little puff. And when you've got a big swatch of it, it kind of looks like little sprouts coming up from the ground. And that's it for sprout stitch.